Web development is the branch of computer science that deals with creating and maintaining a website or web application. Every website you come across is designed with a mix of certain methodologies. A website is generally divided into three parts. Front end, the section that is visible to everyone. Back end, the website section is not accessible to the user. Database, where all the data of the website is stored. A web developer creates the website and ensures that the website should not face any issues right after the deployment. Do you guys know that reports from Glassdoor.com have shown that a full stack developer in the United States earns between $50,000 to $125,000 per annum with an average salary of $105,000? So, what do you think is the most important part when it comes to a job related to web development? The interviews, right? So hello everyone, and you are already watching Simplilearn. Here we are with the complete video on web development interview questions. This video will cover the most frequently asked technical interview questions from a web development profile. But before we start, if you enjoy watching such content and are new to our channel, then hit the subscribe button and press the bell icon to stay updated with the latest technological trends in the market. For today's video, we'll start this video with the most basic technology, the HTML interview questions. We'll then take you through CSS interview questions, followed by JavaScript, Angular, and React interview questions. We'll finally take you through the backend, where we'll cover Node.js interview questions. So let's hand over this session to our training experts.
Now we are heading towards an HTML interview questions. Now here are a few questions like what is an attribute in HTML? So you can consider the attributes are the properties that can be added into the HTML tag and that changes the way the tag behaves or it is displayed. Okay, so you can see here you have a call button. Okay, so attributes are added right after the name of the HTML tag. So button is an element for me, it's not an attribute. Okay, so what is a marquee in an HTML file? So marquee is something which keep on rotating. Okay, say for scrolling down the text page or the text on the web page, marquee is used. Sometimes you might have seen when you want to display some very important information, okay, which needs to scroll at the bottom or else the right after a specific period of time, you always use marquee. It is one of the very old element available under the HTML page. So it scrolls the image top, left, right, center automatically everywhere. So you always use marquee tags for rotating it. So the next is what is the semantic in HTML? See, semantics are HTMLs are nothing but a call another coding style. Okay, so when you talk about a semantics, so they are basically reinforcing the meaning of the contents. Like typically you have seen we are using div and span tag, but the div and span tag really don't make sense to us as an HTML reviewer unless I go inside those and get to know about what they're really doing it. So semantics are nothing but these are the standard tags. Are we clear? So you can see like here, like bold tag is not useful for the bold statement, as well as the italic tag is useful for what? For the italic tag. So instead of we are using strong and em tags. Are we clear now? So this makes more sense to us. Now the next thing is how do you display a table in an HTML web page? So obviously we have got table tag, and under the table tag I can align the complete layout of my web page because of table head, table body, table row, table columns. There are multiple different type of elements which are available, okay, which are the part of table. It's just to basically align the content in a proper format. What is SVG? Okay, so SVG is basically known as a kind of a graphic which is written in a typical XML language. The SVGs are the high quality graphics which doesn't tear off when you basically grow and increase or zoom. So normally what happens, GIF image, we talk about JPEG images, after beyond certain point their pixel get deteriorated, but here in SVG it never happens. So you go to any level when you want to zoom and you're gonna get accurate contents at any point of time. Okay, so these vector graphics are really typically 2D based diagrams and give you the X and Y coordinates in a regular systems. Next, how do you separate a section of text in HTML? To separate a sections of text in HTML, we always use what? Either BR, or else we use block code, or else we use what? A paragraph tag. So BR means anyways, it separate out the text and break the current line. Paragraph is used to again write a paragraph of text, and the block quotes is used to define the large quoted sections. Okay. Next is how do you create the nested web page in HTML? So obviously we have a different type of options that are available like an iframe. Okay, you mean to say page within a web page. Okay, so we can create a page within a web page with using iframe. So this is a very common questions we used to receive at the time of interview. Okay, the difference between ordered list and unordered list. So ordered list will give you the different ways to display the data in Roman format, in numeric digits, or else you can talk about like an alphabetical order. But the unordered list, it's completely unordered. You don't get any options like an ordered list. Okay, so the ordered list start with OL and unordered list starts with UL. Okay, so we have already seen the difference between ordered list and unordered list. Now it's time to talk about our another type of interview questions, which is regards to your CSS. Now, in CSS interview, the first question they always ask you like, how do you add CSS styling in HTML? So we have different ways to include. Number one, we have a called inline CSS where we use the element and within that we try to add a CSS content that is called inline CSS. Second is called external style sheet. Okay, where you can just use as a secondary or the external CSS file and just include it into your existing HTML page. Okay, that is the additional file which you write it in a CSS and you include it in HTML. And third is called which is the internal style sheet which you write it within your HTML. But the only difference happens when you talk about external, it is reusable across multiple web pages. Now, the different type of CSS selectors which are available. So we have a different selectors like a universal selector which is available where you use the asterisk sign and select all the elements and offer the common style. Second, we talk about element type selector where you have the specific element name into your mind and you offer that particular type of selector. ID selector is responsible to select the particular element with it having the proper ID. Class selector which starts with a dot class, okay, and having the class name. We talk about descendant selector. So in descendant selector you basically try to select all the elements which are the part of that. Okay, so you are selecting this container and under that all the child elements of the box. Okay, so we're talking about like in what of your descendant selector we talk about called child combinator. So in this case you are basically trying to select all those which is the child of this container. So you are using this greater than symbol of container dot box. Okay, so selecting all those which are having the child name called box available. Then you're talking about a general sibling selectors with this Tinder sign. And finally, we talk about like an attribute selector where you have a proper attribute available to you. Okay, so these are known as called a general CSS selectors. Followed by we have a next question like in what is Sass, less and stylus. Friends, these are the advanced level of CSS used in the industry. So we talk about like it what is a Sass, which we talk about like in statically awesome style sheet. So we also have a similar type of option like in less and many more. Okay, so it says about the Sass saying that it is a statically awesome style sheet. It is basically taking the complete CSS to the next level. So that is a third-party website, but once again, it is very awesome CSS, which can offer you the mathematical functions as well as the reusability. You talk about less. Okay, so we talk about linear style sheet where you can see all statements which starts with @ sign. There in Sass, every single variable start with a dollar sign. Then you talk about stylus. It is also flexible CSS, so it doesn't use at the rate or dollar for any defining variables. We can just directly use this with the name, okay, and use it at any point of time. So these are the three very popular new or next generation CSS. So explain box sizing property, like how you can offer the property for the box sizing. So here, so box sizing property actually defines how to basically define height and the width of the box which are calculated. So you talk about a term name called content box, you talk about padding box, and you talk about border box. Typically we use three different type of box: content, padding, and border box. In a content box, these are the default width and the height which can apply to the elements content which are there under the content box. Okay, padding box are, here you talk about the dimensions which are added to the box elements of the content padding. Third, which is available called border box. So here the dimensions added to the content padding and the border. Now what are the different way to hide the element in a CSS? So we have a different way. Either we can use display none. That means whatever is there inside a DOM, it won't be visible to you. Second option is visibility hidden. That is another property through which you can eliminate the visibility. But the thing is, like, it is not visible to the user, but this element is added to the DOM and takes up the space. But in display none, it doesn't load in a DOM. So somewhere to, when you want to talk about performance, display none is anytime better. And second called position absolute. So this can be made to the appear outside the screen. So three different options are available. Next option, what does that important CSS mean? So the important keyword actually indicates that the highest precedence and it overrides the cascade properties. Okay, so like as you can see here, we have a call paragraph where we have a color called important, and there's a one ID name called thing, color called green. So when you talk about PID equal to what thing, so it automatically try to override the highest precedence. Okay, now what are the CSS sprites? CSS sprites is a technique where you can basically take a larger image, okay, download in a single shot and try to cut down into the pieces and utilize the way you always want. Okay, so if you're using this small images separately, okay, so to load those images independently, you would be making multiple HTTP calls, which can be an overhead. So it is good to basically download this lengthy image in a single shot, clear, and utilize them as per your convenience within your application. So it is used to minimize the loading time of your web page by combining multiple smaller picture into the single image. Okay, that's what the CSS sprites are. So which properties used to underline and strike through and the overline text? So we have this option: text style, text type, text decoration, text transform. Okay, so the text decoration. So the text decoration is the one which will be helping you to achieve this. Okay, everyone. So our next example is towards focus on JavaScript interview questions. Now here we have few questions that are available, like what are the various data types in JavaScript? So JavaScript contains different type of JavaScript data types. Like if you think about all different types which are there generally: byte, short, int, long, float, double, character, boolean. These are all different type of data types are supported inside a JavaScript. Okay. Now going ahead, what is the callback in JavaScript? So the callback means is a function, okay, that is passed to another function as an argument on a parameter. Okay, so what is the callback? Callback means don't call me, I will call you. Clear? So the idea is like you are passing the function itself as a parameter to the another function, because the JavaScript is known to be a call non-blocking, which never wait for the code to finish. It continues to move on. And due to some reason, if your function it's taking some time to execute, so JavaScript won't wait for that particular function to finish. So you use callback to prevent such behavior. Okay, that's called a JavaScript callback. Now, what is the difference between function declaration and function expression? See, this is called function declaration, and you talk about a function expression. Function declaration is just to declare a separate statement within a main JavaScript code, and you can be called before the function is defined. Okay, it gives you the better readability, where the function expression are always created inside the expression. Okay, and it is created when the execution point reaches it. Are we clear? And it is used when there is a need of for a conditional declaration of a particular function. Now, what do you understand about the cookies in a JavaScript? So it is one of the very common question. Cookies are the one which is created by the server stored in a client side, which is responsible to store all the necessary client activities so that the browser or the application give the better recommendation to the user. Okay, so it is just a small text file which is stored in a browser itself. Okay, so if you want to record something about a user activity, you always put it like that. And you can also define the expiry time for the cookies, okay, as per your convenience, to decide how long the cookie wants to be there inside your browser. If you do not offer any time span, by default the cookie will get lost immediately the moment the browser closed. Next, what are the closures in JavaScript? So closures are the JavaScript is a feature where the inner function has an access to outer functions, variables, and the properties. Okay, so you can consider a closure has a three scope chains. Number one, it has an access to its own scope that is defined within its curly braces. Second, it has an access to the variable of the outer function and also has an access to the global variables. Now, the closure is a JavaScript feature, as I told you, like which has an access to the outer functions variable. Simple example I can give it to you is a function which is known as called inner function, and there's a function defined on the top is an outer function. So it is having all the functionalities access of the outer function inside it. Now, what are the imports and export in JavaScript? So import and exports in a JavaScript is a very common way how in Java you use the term name called import a package. But in JavaScript it is little different. Unless you export something, you can't import it. Okay, so if you want to access any of your files, properties or methods outside of your file, you always use the statement of import and export. So here you can see you have got one property like an sqrt which you are exporting it, and you have one function which is called square. There's another function called, you can say, diag, which you are exporting it and importing it just the way you always want. So that is how it is importing and exporting. What is the difference between undefined, undeclared and null in a JavaScript? See, undefined means a variable that is declared but the value has not been assigned yet. That is called undefined. Undeclared means like it is a null. First of all, we talk about null. Null means it is an assignment value that we can assign to any variable that is meant to contain no value. And undeclared means the variables are not declared and do not exist in a program. Okay, that is called what? Undeclared. How to remove the duplication from the JavaScript array? So you basically needs to use the standard filter methods. Okay, this is basically responsible to help you to analyze whether we have some duplicates available or not. So we'll be using filter methods. Okay, so these are basically known as called array and the current element and the index of current element. And by using the for loop, it is an empty array is used for the storing all the repeated elements. Okay, so these are known as called a typical JavaScript discussion which we have taken place. Multiple questions are there which we have already answered. Okay everyone, so we will go ahead with the next set of interviews which is related to your Angular. So Angular is as popular like in React. Okay, so there are some questions which are usually asked like what is the data binding? Okay, so the data binding is actually the process which allows the application, okay, to have some data associated with your HTML page from your TypeScript classes or the vice versa. Okay, so the data binding is the one through which you bind the data. Okay, so you can see here it says like Angular uses two-way data binding. When the changes happens in a model, it will be affected in a view, and when the changes happens in a view, it will affect the model also. So it is used to typically keep the model and view in sync with each other to have the data interchange. What is a TypeScript? TypeScript is a typical, I would say, a language which is used by Angular, okay, to develop Angular component services, pipes, decorators, and multiple things. It is a superset of JavaScript and it supports JavaScript libraries and APIs. It is a pure object-oriented in nature, uses object-oriented principles, better development time, fast to load, and additional features to the JavaScript for sure. Okay, what is an AOT compilation? How it is different from JIT? AOT stands for ahead of time compiler, which is converting all Angular and HTML and TypeScript code into the JavaScript code during the build phase before the browser downloads and run the code. Okay, so AOT is far more faster and lightweighted in the size. Just-in-time compiler is a by default compiler. Okay, so it is a process where the compiling computer code to the machine code during the execution of runtime. So this ensures the faster rendering in the browser. It also known as called dynamic compilation. Are we clear? So when you want to develop this AOT compiler, you always use hyphen hyphen AOT. Okay, so here you always use JIT compiler because that is the by default compiler used when you say ng build. Next, what are the pipes in Angular? So pipes means they are the decorators. They never change their default value, but just for the representation purpose, they change the values. Okay, to look more better the way they always want. Okay, so pipes are ready-made or else it can be customized created. Angular also comes with lot many predefined pipes. Okay, like it comes with the pipe symbol here. Okay, so you can chain the pipes together. It can be provided with some arguments at the runtime with the colon sign. Okay, now you pass the input, you put the pipe and get some result with some decorated outcome. Now you can see the pure pipes uses the pure functions. Clear? So these pipe doesn't use any internal state and the output remains the same as long as the parameters passed to stay the same. Angular calls the pipe only when it detects the changes in the parameters being passed. A single instance of the pure pipe is used throughout the all components. Okay, so this is how you see how the pipes are being used. So we have defined the pipe, okay, which is the value called true and false for the pure and giving the class by implementing pipe transform. So you can see here the impure pipes for the say for every change detection actually happens in an Angular. And impure is called, are we clear? It regards to the changes in the input fields. Okay, they will be calling every time. So multiple pipe instances are created for the same for these pipes. Inputs passed to these pipes can be mutable. By default, all pipes are pure. Only if you want to make it impure, you always say like pure colon true or pure colon false. Now, what are the promises and observables in Angular? See, promises, it is a typical JavaScript object. Okay, it emits a single values at a time. They execute immediately after the creation and not cancelable. They are pushed error to the child promises. Okay, where the observables are only executable when subscribed to them. They won't call unless you subscribe to them using subscribe methods. So they help perform operations like in for each, filter and retree and everything. When you unsubscribe this, they won't get called and won't listen anymore. What are the form controls and the form groups? See, the form controls and form groups, these are the two predefined objects comes with your Angular. So these all text boxes from you take the input, it may be radio buttons, it may be the drop down, it may be the check boxes are called form controls. Okay, so form controls is a class that enables the validation for every single input class, whichever you are creating it now. So they check the values which are touched, untouched, or the dirty. Clear? Now we talk about called form group. They are basically forming a group which under which you have a called relevant fields joined together are called what? A form group. Okay, so form group class represents a group of controls like you talk about address, contains city, state and pin code. These all three can be together called as a form group. Okay, so the form group class basically return true if all controls are basically what? The valid. Okay, and they are designed to provide all the necessary validation errors. What is a eager and what is a lazy loading? Okay, so eager loading means what? It is a default module loading strategy followed in an Angular. Eager loadings are used before the application starts. These are typically useful for the small scale applications. Lazy loading, however, is designed for dynamically loads the features only on demand. This makes your application far more faster. So in a bigger application, we really don't make easy eager loading because it hamper the performance. And you want only when the client asks you want to use lazy loading. What is a string interpolation in Angular? See, string interpolation is written under the double curly braces. It is a typically one-way binding where you get the data from the TypeScript classes and display directly over your browser. It denotes with the curly braces and it always display the data comes from the component to the view. Well, let's go ahead with the next area that is called working with React.js interview questions. Now, as we know it, React.js is as important as like in other tools which you've already has seen. So what is the JSX here? JSX called JavaScript syntax extension. Okay, so this syntax extension to the JavaScript in React.js is in the way how you express to bind JS and HTML together to result a JSX content. So by using JSX, you can write a HTML structure in the same file that contains the JavaScript code. That is something more innovative way. Because of that, React.js is creating more buzz in the market. So JSX actually helps to making code more easy to understand and debug and avoids a lot of boilerplate code, okay, inside the DOM structure. Now, the next thing is what is the virtual DOM? See, the virtual DOM is representing a DOM in a memory. Okay, that is called virtual DOM. So manipulating the real DOM is much more slower and costly affair. Okay, because you need to repaint the DOM over and over the period of time when the user changes few things. So when the state change, virtual DOM changes and only the objects which are in real DOM, okay, update instead of updating the entire object. So that makes your page to be load far more faster. Okay, so in virtual DOM, what happens? This is the real DOM, this is a virtual DOM. So the orange color portions which you're seeing, that is basically the changes which has been made. Okay, these are called changed object. Okay, so virtual DOM is basically compare it to the previous state and understand which area it needs to send for the updates and avoid the other areas. Okay, that's what this virtual DOM really works. So what are React extension? React extensions are many, like you talk about like in Flux, it is a third-party tool which is responsible to attach the state management feature. You talk about React Native, which is responsible to develop the hybrid mobile applications in JavaScript. So these are two very popular and there are many more which are available. Okay, so like you talk about architectural support, you talk about server-side rendering, Okay, so Redux, and there are a lot many other tools are also available. So what is an event in React and how you're going to create that? So React is basically offering the ideas of handling the event very fairly easy, so that you talk about clicking anything, you talk about taking your mouse somewhere. So these kind of options generate an event. So for that we typically say alert, and you click on this render, you click on this button, in a curly braces you call the function to trigger to event. Now what are the components in React? So friends, React components are nothing but a call view. Okay, like a complex view can be divided into the smaller portions. A complex UI can be distributed further to create more, better, and reusable views. Clear? So it splits the user interface into the independent pieces of code which can be developed and joins later on. Okay, so that's how you define the component in React. So in Angular and React, in both the areas, the word component is very much used. So the component meaning is very simple. You talk about a view. So what is the state in a React? So state is React is nothing but is the one which identify what was and what is now. Okay, which stores the value for the specific period of time, which changes, and React is basically detecting those. So it is changing because of some actions either taken by the users or by the applications. Okay, so it keep tracking about all those states what it was there. Like in, I'm talking about an incrementing in a counter. So that is also the state available there. Okay, so the state object is always initialized in the constructor. So it can contain the multiple properties. So this dot set state is used to change the value of the state object, and set state is responsible to perform the shallow merge between the new state and the previous state. Now, the state holds the data that a component renders to the web page. Certainly, because every time the state changes, so it needs to be stored somewhere. So this is how the state is accessed. As you can see this example here. In the constructor, we are defining the super props and the states being initialized, and you're rendering the states. There are three different steps are involved: initialize the state, render the state, and update the states. What is a higher order component and pure component in React? Higher order components are the component which are typically a function, okay, that takes a component and return a new component to you by manipulating few things. They're basically designed for the reusing. Okay, so the higher order components are typically a function that takes a component and return a new component. Okay, so in order to perform some reusability. A pure components are the components, okay, is a variation of React component that does a shallow comparison of props and state. Okay, shallow comparison basically checks what the equality. Are we clear now? So that's what the main job. Going ahead, what do you implement and how do you implement React routing? So to implement a React routing also comes with inbuilt React modules, and that particular module need to import it. So here we define the React modules by offering the route path, where you have a call left hand side is the name and the right hand side is a component which you would like to deliver it now.
Hello, this is Matthew, and we're going to be going through some of the simple questions that you would be asked during a Node.js interview. What we're going to do is we're actually going to break out the section into three key areas. There'll be beginner questions, there'll be intermediate questions, and advanced questions. And the expectation is, as you go through this video, is that these questions could be pushed together as you're going through the interview. Kind of think of it like this: is if you answer the beginner questions that you would get asked at the beginning of the interview with confidence and surety, then the client is going to then jump to those intermediate and advanced questions quite quickly, and they're looking for people who can help them serve and solve their problems at that more intermediate and advanced level. So let's just get started. So the first question you're probably going to be asked is, what is Node.js? Do you know what it's for? And essentially, Node.js is one of the most popular, if not the most popular, open source cross-platform JavaScript programs. It allows you to build out web applications that run on the server. It's extremely flexible. It allows you to implement a lot of solutions outside of just the core programming runtime. And it allows you to build solutions extremely quickly in an open source mindset for DevOps. It is used essentially for creating client-side web applications. We'll see this later on, and you may want to talk a little bit about using Express.js and how you can build out APIs to work with Node.js and connecting to databases such as MongoDB. And that is also really good for being able to store data-intensive applications that are asynchronous and event-driven in their model. And this is important when you're talking about creating applications that can scale rapidly. So you're going to then be asked, how does Node.js work? Well, Node.js itself is actually built on the V8 engine, and the V8 JavaScript engine is the same engine that runs JavaScript in your Chrome web browser, extremely fast. It allows for high output and non-blocking through your I/O input outputs, and is single-threaded event loop. So you're going to be then asked, where can you use Node.js? And the reality is that the applications for Node.js keep expanding, but there are some core applications that you can work with Node.js right now. Such as web applications, distributed system, and network applications. Probably referencing the web applications is a really good starting point, because here you can actually talk about maybe some examples that you've done where you're building out some of these web applications. Indeed, one of the things that you want to be consistently doing and peppering your answers with is examples of work that you have done. Now, it doesn't matter if those examples are purely experimental or training examples that you've done. The fact that you've actually worked with Node.js and created a distributed system or a web application is really valuable, because it shows the person that you're meeting with that you have knowledge and understanding and practical experience of applying the theory of working with Node.js with the practice of working with Node.js. So be asked about, essentially the I/O refers to the transfer of data in and out of a system. And that's really it. And there's a reason why Google calls their conference I/O. It's the transfer of data in and out of our brains at their conference. The application is the same here. It's about moving data in and out of systems through using Node.js. And that every event can be tracked, whether it's on a physical device, a network, or files within a system. Again, it's input and output. So let's go through, and you're going to be asked, can you explain the difference between front-end and back-end development? And this is a question that I get asked a lot when I'm meeting with clients. People get really confused about what is the difference between front-end and back-end development. Bottom line, front-end is what gets resolved inside of your web browser or the app on your mobile device. Back-end is what gets resolved, essentially what we call the back office or server-side applications, but that's becoming more and more synonymous for what gets run in the cloud. So web applications really get a lot of the functionality of a web application gets run in the front end. And I think with CSS, HTML5, client-side JavaScript, it's all going to get run in the front end. Everything else, such as connecting to a database, gets run behind the scenes in the back end. And anything that's going to have like graphics is going to be on the front end. APIs are going to be run on the back end. And then just finally, some of the scripting languages that you use on the front end. So HTML, CSS, JavaScript, those are all common core scripting languages that you would use. You can use frameworks such as AngularJS and React.js or Vue. Those would be front-end frameworks. Back-end frameworks would include Java, PHP, Python, and Node.js are some of the back-end technologies. You'd also throw in there .NET as well. It's just a whole litany of front-end and back-end technologies and frameworks that you can use. And this is actually a good point to kind of explain the experience you have outside of just working with Node.js, but other technologies that you've been working with that potentially that the client is also using. So another question you're going to be asked when you're looking at Node.js is, can you tell me about NPM? And so when somebody asks you what is NPM, the first thing you're going to respond is, do you mean Node Package Manager? And the reason why you want to respond like that is that you want to qualify their question with understanding that you know what they're talking about, but you want them to verify that. And so Node Package Manager is NPM. And it's responsible for packaging all of your modules that you're working with in Node.js. And we have a whole series of videos that we've done on Node.js, and every single one of them includes references to NPM. So you're going to be asked, okay, you told me what it is, can you go into a little bit more details, so can you provide two main functionalities? And so one of them is being able to manage online repositories of modules and packages. So you can go to like search.nodejs.org and you can find packages that you can install into your solution, such as Express.js. And it also provides a command line utility that allows you to manage your packages very quickly through terminal window or command line. I use VS Code a lot, Visual Studio Code, and it has a command line utility built right into it that allows me to interact with NPM. So what are some of the modules in Node.js? And so, modules in Node.js, they're essentially like JavaScript libraries. So you can think of some of the JavaScript libraries that you may have used. The functionality is somewhat the same, but they're designed for Node.js and to run on the server. And there are ways in which you can go ahead and create some of those modules. So for instance, if we're creating a web server, you can actually use the require command to be able to require that the server be there. So the example we have on the right-hand side shows that we really do need to have HTTP, which is a web server, and we require that to be installed. And so that if you're running that NPM package, it will actually install the HTTP server, and then you can actually write some code to actually then listen on the local host port 2000 for where you'll be running your application. And there are just, there's a whole bunch of modules that come with Node.js right out of the gate. And here are some of the modules that you have. We also referenced just earlier on, HTTP is a core module for running a web server. You have a utility function that is useful for developers to assess features within your Node.js project. You have a URL module for any URL parsing you'd be doing. And you also have a stream, which allows you to be able to stream data in and out of your system and be able to manage how that's being worked. And then zlib, which allows you to compress and decompress files so that you can keep your storage of files to a minimum. So a question you're going to be asked is, why is Node.js being preferred over backend technologies such as Java and PHP? Particularly with Java, it's a very mature, stable language. It's been around for more than 20 years. PHP runs some of the most powerful and largest websites out there, such as Facebook. So why would you use Node.js? Well, the first response is kind of a gimme, but it is really fast. And if you watched any of the videos that we've done on Node.js, building out solutions and developing the solutions, you'll see just how fast it is. The second is the really kind of the secret sauce with Node.js is the Node Package Manager. And the Node Package Manager allows you to install additional functionality such as Express or Mongo as a database into your solution really quickly. And there's over 50,000 bundles available for Node Package Manager. If you're building out a real-time application that's data intensive and you need to have APIs quickly developed, then Node.js is really the great solution for you. It allows you to build out these solutions really quickly. And there is a easy synchronization between the server and the client due to the code base. And then finally, because the structure of Node.js is JavaScript, if you are making the pivot from being a front-end web developer to Node.js, it's just going to make it a lot easier for you to pick up Node.js because you have that common language of JavaScript. And on top of that, JavaScript is the world's most popular scripting language. So let's talk about some of the differences between Angular and Node.js. And so the reason why this question may come up is the person interviewing you is seeing whether or not you do know the difference between a front-end framework and a back-end framework. And this is one of those questions where you can go, well, there are differences, but the differences are because they complement each other. So Angular is a front-end development framework, whereas Node.js is a server-side framework. Other differences, though, between the actual frameworks themselves is that Angular is written in TypeScript, which is a modification of JavaScript. Node.js is written in C and C++. Angular is used for building out single-page client-side web applications. And so that's the key word there is client-side, whereas Node.js is about building out fast and scalable server-side network applications. Again, the two complement each other. Angular splits web applications into the MVC and model view control components, whereas Node.js generates a lot of database queries. It does more than that as well, but you can think of Node.js as that glue to your database. So let's talk a little bit about when you're connecting to a database with Node.js. And so you're going to probably be asked, what is the most popular database used with Node.js? And there are a couple. MongoDB is largely the most popular NoSQL cross-platform database. MySQL is also very popular, and that's a more traditional relational database. You would go with MongoDB for really more modern solutions. When you're looking at creating an application that's going to really scale into just managing masses and masses of data that has to be created, read, updated, and deleted very, very quickly. For some of the other popular libraries that you use for Node.js, Express.js is a very popular one. I really like working with Express.js. It allows me to build out web applications really quickly. More importantly, it allows me to build out APIs very quickly, and which, APIs are essentially web applications themselves. But being able to do that very quickly with a framework like Express.js is very useful. Mongoose is an application that makes connecting to a Mongo database really easy. So here is an example of Express.js, which is in itself really a flexible but a solution that you can do lots with, and Mongoose, which is a more focused solution, which allows you make it easier to connect to your databases. So, what are the pros and cons of working with Node.js? There's lots of ways, and we explained this earlier on, that you can actually build out applications that run on the cloud. Why would what are the pros and cons? So a pro is that Node.js is extremely fast at processing an event-based model. It really is fast. A con is if you have something that is a very heavy computational task, it's not so good at that. Now, I will caveat that Node.js is getting better all the time. And so you might have to provide an example of what a very heavy computational task is. And that may be calculating a risk on an insurance application against many, many variables. That may be something that's seen as computationally very heavy. But what you can do in that example is you can then offload the task to another solution that's designed for it and use APIs to pass the data back and forth. JavaScript is used for building out your applications with Node.js. Great. Lots of people know JavaScript. A restriction, and again, this is evolving as JavaScript itself evolves, is that when you do a callback, you may end up doing lots of nested callbacks if you're doing something that's very complicated. Again, another way around the con, and so this is one of the things that I always look for, is if you have a blocker or a barrier How do you get around that barrier? And so, for instance, when you're talking to your recruiter, you can say, look, the reason why I use Node.js is that it's fast, it's event-based driven, I can use JavaScript. There are some challenges, but what I do to get around those challenges are, and that's where you can say that, you may run the complex script off and you may write that in .NET or Java or PHP, and then use an API to do the response back into Node.js. So you get the benefits of both worlds, but minimize the investment in having to manage a complex environment such as Java versus a relatively simple environment with Node.js. The Node Package Manager makes it extremely easy to access just an awful lot of functionality. With over 50,000 packages, there's a package for that. So from being able to have a tool that creates unique identifiers that you might need to have for generating content that gets posted into a database, through to being able to connect to databases, through to running so many different solutions. The NPM Package Manager, with its access to so many different packages, makes it great for getting access to all that content. Now, a con is working with relational databases with Node.js isn't as easy as a NoSQL database. Now, you can do it, and there are ways around that. And what I would do when this question comes up is always kind of pivot to say, hey, this is how you can actually then get around building out that application. Pro for Node.js, designed for streaming huge amounts of data in and out. A con is that Node.js is single-threaded, and so it can be CPU intensive. But again, there are ways around that, and a good way around that is scaling your solution in an elastic environment such as the cloud. So what is the command used to import an external library? And so to import an external library, the command is the require command. So an example we have here is you can start a variable, and the variable is going to be for HTTP, and you're going to then require the HTTP service. That means that the application itself won't run unless the external library, the HTTP library, is installed. Okay, so those were our introductory questions for Node.js. Let's kind of pivot and take a look at the intermediate questions that you would be asked. So what does event-driven programming mean? So event-driven programming means that if something happens, something else will happen in response. So for instance, if you click a mouse, that mouse click is an event. That means something has to respond to that event. Just think of it as cause and effect. It's just the basic motion of physics. So that's what event-driven programming means. You also look at it as a callback function so that when an element is executed, something will happen in response. So what is an event loop in Node.js? So an event loop in Node.js is when you do an asynchronous call. And what that essentially means is that you are sending out data, and then a non-blocking input-output from Node.js is pulling data back in. What is an event emitter in Node.js? So an event emitter has really two areas of focus. One is that it manages the classes that hold all the objects within your event. And we have an example of this on the right-hand side. And then whenever an event actually is thrown, the functions are then called on that event synchronously. So for instance, we have in our example on the right-hand side, we create an event, and then we have the functions that are executed in a series from that event. So let's talk about the API functions in Node.js. So there are two types. One is an asynchronous non-blocking function, and the second is a synchronous blocking function. And the difference between the two of them is asynchronous is that there is no structure to the order for how the API is resolved. Synchronous means that when the feedback from the API is received, you have to execute the response in a series for how the response is sent to you. So what is a package JSON file? So the package JSON file is at the heart of our Node.js package when we actually will initialize a solution folder to be a Node.js package. You'll find that the package itself holds all of the metadata that's particular to the project you're working on, such as project name, version, requirements. You have to have it installed in the root of the directory for the project. And again, look at any of the videos that we have on Node.js. We do have demonstrations within those videos that actually then go through and break out how to create that root package. And you'll see how you can actually then go ahead and update the instructions or the metadata within the package. So here we have an example of what that metadata looks like. So again, this kind of continues that question of what is a package JSON file? And you may be asked, what is the metadata and why is it important? And the metadata is a basic JSON collection of pairing of key details such as name, version, description, and then the custom version that you put. So for instance, under name, you could create a name for your project. There can't be any spaces. What is the version and the description? What is the main or starting path for the solution? Typically, that would be index.js, but it could be anything.js. But index.js is typical simply because index.html is the starting point for a typical web application. So how would you use a URL module in Node.js? So with a URL module, what it allows you to do is really two things. One is that it provides the resolution and parsing of a URL for utilities in your application. And then it allows you to extend your module with built-in solutions and split up the web address into a readable format. So in this example, we have the URL and the response it would give for that URL, which would then be a year and month, and it would be in a readable format. So it would read out as 2020 and then the month. So what is Express.js? Now you've heard me mention this a couple of times in the video, and we actually have a separate video on Express.js. But Express.js is a web application framework that allows you to build out web solutions for both mobile and traditional desktop right inside of Node.js. So it's very easy to use. Being able to install Web.js is as simple as requiring Express to be installed. In the example that we have here on the screen, it's a full solution of showing how to actually build out a solution with Web.js. So in this example, you start off the first two lines, require Express to be installed, and the install comes from Node Package Manager. Then we have a simple application that will then send to the browser window a hello world message confirming that Express is up and running. And then the third block of content, starting with var server, actually will define the port where your application is going to run. So in this instance, the port is going to run on localhost, and the port will be port 8081. And so you can actually go to localhost 8081. And when you do that, that will trigger the application that will forward up the message, hello world. And it's all coming from Express.js. So what are streams in Node.js? So streams are objects that allow you to read and write data continuously back and forth within your application. And there's really four different types of streams. There's readable, writable, duplex, and transform. The readable one is streams for which data can be read. The writable is streams that you can actually write to. A duplex is a stream where it is both readable and writable. And transform are streams that can manipulate the data while it is being read or written. So how do you update and delete a dependency? So Say, for instance, we want to install something like Express. So if you wanted to install Express, what you would do is you would just write inside of your project. You want to go to terminal window and write in the command npm install Express. If you want to update the dependencies within your Node package manager, to update all of them, all you have to do is write the command npm update all dependencies. And then if you want to explicitly uninstall a dependency such as Express.js, that's using the uninstall command. And so that would again be going to terminal window and you would type npm uninstall Express. And again, it's really easy to create a simple server in Node.js that will run a simple command. The HTTP service is actually built into Node.js. You don't need to use Express.js. I typically use Express.js when I want to do a web server, because typically what I find is that I will want to go and do something more complicated. But if you want to do something that illustrates just the core functionality within Node.js, you can actually just require the core HTTP service that actually comes as part of Node.js. And then you can actually then go ahead and tell it to create a service and then to write in plain text a command or a text string, such as in this case, it'll be hello world, that would pop out. And then the final line is to then listen that if you go to a web browser that's on port 127.0.01 or localhost and go to port 8080, once you actually go to that, that will trigger this application and you'll get the text hello world pop up on your screen. So explain synchronous and non-blocking APIs in Node.js. So all the APIs in Node.js are asynchronous, which means that they are non-blocking, which means you can run them continuously and scale around that, which is just fantastic. It's one of the reasons why Node.js can scale so fast. And the means that the APIs can return data, send data after it's been called, and really increase the efficiency of events as they are triggered within Node.js. So how do you implement async in Node.js? And so the example that we have on the left-hand side allows us to trigger async, and it's using the async function. And as you can see in this example, it's actually something that can be done very quickly. In this example, we're actually making a command to localhost and an app that's running on port 3000. And then depending on what we get, if there's an error message, then we'll have error message go to the console log, which is the terminal window. And if we get a response to an application, then we'll actually get a positive response, which would be fetched response. So again, very quick and easy that you use the async function to be able to build out and to get your asynchronous code. So what is the purpose of module exports? So a module export is a way to encapsulate the entire code for a solution in a single package, in a single file. And then you can then share that with other developers, so you're all working from the same environment.
So with this, we have come to the end of this video on web development interview questions. I hope the session was informative and interesting. If you have any questions or queries regarding any of the questions we have covered in this particular video, or if you have any other questions which was not covered in this video, then please feel free to drop them down in the comment section below, and our team of experts will be happy to resolve all your queries and questions at the earliest. So until next time, thank you, stay safe, and keep learning with Simplilearn.
Hi there, if you like this video, subscribe to the Simplilearn YouTube channel and click here to watch similar videos. To nerd up and get certified, click here.